I once took out an Old Town Loon to Petit Manan.
On
a scale of 1 to 10.
I don't hear about that.
I was going to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stupid was that?
Well, so is 10 the most stupid?
Yes. Well, it was a flat, calm day, so. But
it doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter.
It's Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket, and this is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. What can I say? I think my kayak is trying to kill me. We're now into the first week of summer, and my kayak keeps trying to talk me into doing something crazy. Again. I think it gets mad when I leave it in the garage all winter. I can vaguely remember some advice I got last year from kayaking expert Karen Francoeur, and I think maybe I should hear it again. In fact, that'll be the first of 3 topics I will revisit from shows originally aired last year. Rescue dogs and sporting camps are also getting a reprise today because both are more relevant today than ever. Stick around and I'll show you what I mean. Today's show is brought to you by Old Town Trading Post, Dysarts, Hammond Lumber, Napa Auto Parts, Van Raymond Outfitters, O'Neill's Power Equipment, and EBS. Something didn't happen this spring. The 14th Annual Paddle Smart Safety Symposium. The event took a year off to consider changes to location and format, which means that I didn't get my yearly dose of preaching about common sense in the water. Frankly, I need it. So do a lot of us. Last year, I had Karen Francoeur on the show. She's the owner of Castine Kayak, and you've probably seen her doing one of her safety demonstrations at the Eastern Maine Sportsman Show, Orland River Days, or maybe some other event. Last year, I got the whole story from her about Paddle Smart, and I would like to repeat a portion of that safety talk, starting with a question: what is the one thing most people often do wrong?
What is the one thing people most often do wrong? You know, I'm going to say how they dress, and not bringing food and snacks.
Oh, really?
You know,
see, I would have said not bringing paddle float or something like that.
Well, I mean, that, really, that goes without saying.
Okay.
I mean, I guess the biggest thing people do wrong is they're paddling the wrong boat in the wrong location. But let's assume they have all that in gear, because really, you definitely need the right boat, and you need bulkheads in your boat if you're any distance from shore. So that's been sort of my safety message, throughout all these years, is having boats that actually do float and keep water out, and then your rescues work. And so that's what my demonstration is going to be about.
I once took out an Old Town Loon to Petit Manan.
On
a scale of 1 to 10.
I don't hear about that.
I was going to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stupid was that?
Well, so is 10 the most stupid?
Yes. Well, it was a flat, calm day, so. But
it doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter, because no matter how flat, calm it is, if a boat that doesn't have bulkheads capsizes, and this is the piece that a lot of people don't realize, and this is the piece that we're so glad to be at the boat show, because we reach a lot of these people. If that loon capsized in coastal water, or in the middle of a big lake in cold water, when it capsizes, it is going to fill with water from bow to stern. And so what's going to happen is you're going to try to get in it, and as soon as your body weight's in it, that boat is still going to kind of float, but it's not going to float above the side gunnels of the boat, and so water is going to continually pour in, so there's no way you're going to be able to stay in that boat. The only way you could get in it is if you bailed all the water out of it somehow, and then precariously were able to get in it, which would take you, we've demonstrated this in the pool, it would take you more than 10 minutes, and within 10 minutes, you're going to lose use of your extremities.
Well, I promise not to do it again.
Yeah, so that boat, totally. When I hear that, I hear people taking loons, in the Blue Hill Falls, or it's like, no. That boat, it was a great, it's a great boat for near shore in a little tiny stream where you can stand up and the water's flat calm.
Yeah.
And you could outfit that with, you could put foam in there. Someone I just talked to the other day, she was telling me how her husband took that boat and put that spray-in foam in it and filled the whole bow and the whole stern with spray-in foam, and then sealed it off. Now they've got a boat that really, could be okay. And the reality is Old Town Canoe doesn't even make that boat anymore. It's hard to find boats now that don't have some bulkhead. Yeah. And if there's foam in there, though, don't be fooled. If it's not solid, water is still going to go in behind. And a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Well, have you ever led a tour where actually nothing went right?
No.
Really?
I don't need those. I don't need those kind of trips. No, because really, I really prepare for what I do. I really prepare, and no matter what goes wrong, I'm ready for it. Because that's the kind of paddler I am, and that's why I'm a Master Maine Sea Kayak Guide, because I do prepare. So the wind may come up, but I've always got a plan B. Mm-hmm. Or, we might have. There was one trip. I did lead one trip, which it was a 3-day camping trip, and I had given my people a gear list, and they brought everything on it. And they told me at the end, they said, "We used everything on your list. It was perfect." It rained the entire time. Actually, Dan Pelletier came on that trip, and he was awesome at setting up. He set up, like a rain shelter when we were cooking, and it always stopped raining when we had meals, which was very perfect because I kind of have an in with Mother Nature. But we ended up, we were at the 3rd day, which it had rained every day. There was one time we were crossing the bay, and huge waves came up, and I had one person on the trip she just locked up. She was so terrified of the waves. So I clipped onto her boat with a contact tow, which I have readily accessible, mm-hmm. and we paddled together across a mile-long crossing, and I had her boat attached to mine, so she was totally stable. And she was a writer, and she started, halfway through, she started saying, A is for adventure, and she started giving and D is for disaster and destruction, and I was like, I think you're doing a little bit better, Julie. You're starting to write.
I made it all the way down to S for stupid, so I know where you're coming from.
She was great, and then we got across there, and then so that turned out really good, and then the last day we had this huge storm go through, and I knew some people on the outside of Cape Rozier that had this awesome gazebo, so we pulled up our boats because we could see the storm coming, and we got in the gazebo, and we must have stayed in that gazebo for an hour waiting this storm out, singing songs, stretching, trying to stay warm. But the reality is if you truly know what you're doing and you're truly prepared, you always have a backup plan.
Yeah.
And so, no, I've never had a trip go bad. And those things are the things that you remember later. You're like, remember when we were in that gazebo and we were starting to freeze, but we were doing jumping jacks, and we had extra clothes, and we had all the things that we really needed.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like sea kayaks are the one boat that doesn't have organized races. Even lobster boats have races.
Well, Bob, maybe we should get on that.
My guest is Karen Francoeur, renowned water safety expert and owner of Castine Kayak. Up next, why Castine? And still to come, rescue dogs and sporting camps when Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine returns in a moment on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. If you're just joining us, this show may sound vaguely familiar. Just before the Paddle Smart Safety Symposium last year, I had Karen Francoeur on the show to talk about paddle safety. This is a reprise of that portion of the interview. Paddle Smart took a year off this year, but kayaking just keeps getting bigger and more people are getting into it. Karen lives in Orono, but her business is in Castine. So my question is, why choose Castine?
Castine chose me.
Yeah?
Yeah, Castine chose me. When I started my business, I got a phone call asking me if I wanted to set up a satellite business in Castine. And at the time, I was with the Penobscot River Keepers, mm-hmm. and we would always have like a big campfire in each community on our way down the river. And I said, well, you know what? I'll go to the campfire because I'm involved in hosting it anyway, and I'm involved in coordinating it because I was the coordinator with the River Keepers, and I came into the community and I said I'm going to talk to people and see what they think, and people were so welcoming. They were like, oh, we would love you to have a kayak shop here, and we know this great little house you can rent, and it's really great for kids, and At the time, my son was 10, and so it was a perfect community for him where he could be in the yacht club and the tennis club and, and golf. And so it was a perfect place. And Castine is a very dynamic place to paddle. We're surrounded by a lot of land trust lands. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of conservation land there. So, we're surrounded by Holbrook Island Sanctuary, and then the Castine Conservation Association has properties there, and Maine Coast Heritage Trust. And so we have so many places to paddle and get out and explore, and we have a shipwreck there. We have really dynamic tides and currents, so if you know what you're doing, you can hop on the conveyor belt and
yes.
ride the tide. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you're going to be paddling in place for a while.
I've done that. Remember what I said about stupid? Yeah, I've done that too.
Oh, you've done that too?
Yeah, I've got the tide wrong.
God, this is why I run classes. I run classes because, in a nutshell, you really shorten that learning curve, and then you can really enjoy the sport and not get into trouble. Because someone who doesn't really understand the tide either might really get out in mud flats, which mm-hmm. is really, really dangerous because there's all kinds of mussels and clams underneath, and it'll suck your shoes off, and then you're barefoot in the mussels and clams. And the other is when the tide opposes the wind, you can really get standing waves.
Yeah, I've done that one too.
Yeah, so all those things, I have a series 2 through 4 classes that I teach that really, introduce people to all those things and how to really take all those things to your advantage and good trip planning.
That's Karen Francoeur of Castine Kayak. Today, I'm picking some bits and pieces out of shows from last year that you may have missed. I'm back with a portion of a show we did on sporting camps. Sooner or later, everything changes. But I'm a Mainer. I'm against all change. Some of Maine's historic camps are over a century old. Meanwhile, the kind of comfort and modern amenities that vacationers expect is changing. There are threats to some of Maine's hunting traditions when voters go to the polls this fall, and they would almost certainly kill off a few of those camps. I have a fondness for sporting camps, and some of that is very personal. In my youth, my grandparents owned some weekly rental camps that they bought in 1946, and my parents helped out. I was in that cycle of shoring up foundations and painting the rustic cottages every spring, and then cleaning them every weekend before the next guests arrive. It was my job to rake the leaves, and to this day, I hate raking leaves. But I love watching the fishermen come back with their catch after a day out on the lake. I get to relive that every time I have John Rust on Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine.
Thank you, Bob.
The Maine Sporting Camp Heritage Foundation has me intrigued. I looked at your website, and it's a great website. It really has all the information I would look for in order to understand what's going on with that tradition in Maine. So congratulations, first of all, on a very good foundation to start with. What are the challenges the Maine sporting camps face?
Well, the challenges are really developed over the years, and not just in attracting people, but getting the word out on who they are. During the last 100 years, they had a heyday, and then in the last 30 years or so, there really has been a decline. And some of the challenges are just keeping seasonal businesses going, running a business in Maine, and then in the outdoor world, encroachment from others. 30, 40 years ago, when they were still running logs down the rivers and so forth in Maine, most of these camps, or a lot of them, were fly-in only, or you canoed in or boated in, and pretty much all of them now are drive-in, and that's actually opened up some customer markets for them and some opportunities for different activities at the camps. But the real thing that's happened is the lands that they're on are typically leased land, and 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, the landowners would give very long-term leases, and the owners of these businesses felt comfortable building cabins and making nice accommodations and so forth. But now the landowners have become more reluctant to give long-term leases, and the camps are unable to obtain financing to invest in their properties. And like every other business, if you don't continually invest and upgrade and maintain your property, you can't keep up. And so what's happened is a lot of them have declined in quality, and amenities and so forth, and there's sort of like a downward spiral of their business to where they can't economically stay open.
Yeah, that's really got me scared.
And then they close up, or along the way, someone figures out that spot is a beautiful spot, but the land is very valuable because typically it's waterfront land in choice locations. They picked these locations 100 to 150 years ago, so they're going to be beautiful. And the only people that can afford to buy those are not people trying to run a business. They're people that with some resources behind them that buy these, and a number of them have actually become private properties. And what happens there is people like you and I, we can't go do all the things we like to do there because unless we're a guest of that individual, but most of the sporting camps that are commercial, we can always go there. We book a night, maybe 2 nights, a week, or whatever, but it's pretty much, as long as they have room, you're welcome to go, and that's what they're there for. So we're trying to keep those camps available for us to go when we want to go there, and avoid them being so run down that they close up and just disappear, or they turn into private compounds, or things where we really can't get access to.
That's been happening at an alarming rate, because I understand that maybe around the turn of the last century there were 300 sporting camps in Maine, and we're down to something like 40.
The exact numbers are always hard to figure out, but I had I think it's a 1940 or 1935 issue of the In the Maine Woods magazine that the railroads put out, and it's just filled with ads of all the camps. And now the Sporting Camp Association, I think, has roughly 50 members. There may be other camps out there that aren't members, but some of those members, they aren't really the traditional ones. There are new operations trying to make a start at this. But the number has declined a lot, and what really hurts in any industry when the number of participants in the industry decline, the collective marketing and awareness by the public of these opportunities declines as well.
That is
so
one of the things
go
that
to places outside Maine, and you can't. And they don't. You talk about a sporting camp, they don't really know what you're talking about. Whereas 100 years ago, they probably did.
I think that's one of the things that's killing me now. Is I go to a sporting show or even any kind of outdoor celebration exposition, and I see all these camps from Labrador. And I'd say, why? Nobody has to go to Labrador to get this experience. It's right in our backyard, but we have lost so many of our camps and so much of that heritage that we're not even marketing it very well anymore.
Well, and part of that is these tend to be small family-run businesses just due to the size of their operations and so forth. And those kind of businesses always have a hard time getting the money together to market and don't always have the knowledge and ability to do it. In Canada, it's a very different situation. Is people are willing to pay to go on their once-in-a-lifetime trip to Labrador to go catch a 5-pound brook trout or hunt a caribou or something else like that. And they also have the government in Canada puts a lot of money into marketing and assisting these kind of operations. So it is. But in Maine, it's been... from 40 years ago when you took a float plane to fly in these and you would go to a town like Greenville was just like Anchorage is. It's like you would go there and you'd get your float plane ride into a remote camp, and it was a accessible, very inexpensive way to have all that same experience that you would pay many, many times more in Canada or in Alaska.
John Rust is my guest from the Maine Sporting Camp Heritage Foundation. There was one change that had a big impact on sporting camps back in the late 60s. You could probably guess what it was. Or you can just wait a couple of minutes and find out. You're listening to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. It's Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Still to come, search and rescue dogs. But right now, we're talking sporting camps. If you own one, I'll bet you're not getting rich off of it. Probably just the opposite, right? John Rust is president of the Maine Sporting Camp Heritage Foundation. And before the break, he was telling us about how Maine used to be like Alaska and Labrador. No roads. If you want to go somewhere remote, you'll need a float plane. Of course, the big change came when log drives ended and all those roads were built into the Maine woods. There is almost no place you can't get to by pickup if you don't mind ruts and dust. Almost every body of water is reachable and fishable.
That is a big change, and the good part of that is it's made it possible to spread people out more throughout the North Woods and get them access to various spots that they didn't have before. Sort of the downside is that you can do it for a day if you're in the right area. Of course, if you're in Aroostook County or in the Millinocket Greenville area, and that's where you live and work, the North Woods is a day trip for you. Bangor, south, it's not so easy to do that, but it is still possible.
Yeah, the other major change is, I think, the change in land ownership in the Maine woods. When it was owned by the paper companies themselves, they were interested in protecting that wood basket, and the good properties along the lakeside really wasn't of huge concern to them. But now that you have landowners who are in it for relatively short-term investment, 10, 20 years, something like that, they look at those valuable properties along the shore and have a different view as to what might be their future.
Well, I think part of the change is with the shorter-term ownership and the more financially oriented ownership that once interest rates and inflation and everything that kicked in 30 years ago, the assets you have and the income that asset produces became much more critical. And that's sort of how the mills get separated from the land and so forth, as everyone broke it up and said, okay, this piece of asset has to produce that income. And along the way, the land becomes an investment, and it's still one of a very good investment for large investors and funds. But they are very reluctant to give those long-term leases, and partly, I think, due to they don't want to have an encumbrance of a long-term nature that any future buyer that they may sell to would be concerned about, and which is not good for the sporting camps that are on short-term lease, because now they don't know if the next landowner or the next year that they'll be able to continue operating, and that has happened in a couple instances where people had to move their camps or close it down or so forth.
Yep, and then you of course face the decline in hunting and fishing that's really happened over the last generation or so.
Well, actually, hunter numbers are up in the last 10 years, but in Maine's North Woods, the deer numbers are down, and that has really affected a lot of the clientele that these businesses may have for that time. Other opportunities have increased, though. Over the last 30 years, bear hunting has become much more popular in Maine. Moose hunting is now back and very strong. And with the roads have actually increased access to those people, plus the bird hunters, and so a lot of these camps do have opportunities to cater to more hunters than they used to in the past. It's a different experience. The hunters that are going out there today are different than 50 years ago, where scent control is sort of a modern term, and so scent control means you have to be clean, your clothes are clean, and you're scent-free so the game doesn't scent you. And so sporting camps needed to go from outhouses to indoor plumbing and showers or things like that. And just like in the bed and breakfast industry, once upon a time you could have shared bathrooms. Sporting camps are catering to clientele now that no one wants to have shared bathrooms, so therefore they need to upgrade their facilities. And then you get the lease problem, and the capital investment you have to put into the properties becomes another issue.
And modern amenities really is a challenge for a lot of the sporting camps. First of all, they're so far away from crews who can come in and repair and upgrade. And secondly, getting materials there is difficult. And third, you have the energy problems of being off the grid and dealing with that.
Well, you're definitely on your own, and that's one of the unique things about sporting camps and the owners that you'll meet is the successful ones are definitely jack of all trades. You have to fix a toilet, fix the plumbing, and then cut firewood and all the above in between, plus cater to your clientele and show them a good time, give them good food, keep them warm and dry and so forth. And A lot of different things going on there that it takes to make these. So it's very difficult, especially when you have an operation big enough to have employees. Now you're looking at employees who you're asking to live in a remote area for several months at a time. And so it all adds up. It's a unique experience for the visitors and very unique for the people who own these properties. They call it a lifestyle business because of that, and it is definitely tied to a way of life for them. But they also need it to generate the income so they can support themselves and pay for their own costs and reinvest in the camp as well.
Yeah, it takes a special kind of person because it's a short season. You have to either have some kind of other employment in the off season to keep you sustained, or you're pretty much on a retirement income, and this is what you do.
Well, definitely there are operations who do well enough that that is their business, but they have to keep busy. You have the busy season in the spring, getting the camp ready, and the fishing season, the summer season, all the different hunting opportunities in the fall. Some try to keep open in the winter now. Others that are marking their business so it is busy in the summer spend the winter going to sport shows and the travel and so forth with that. But many do end up taking second type of businesses, and they may be winter-oriented businesses because it's one seasonal job after another. So I know that there's camp owners out there that drive oil delivery trucks in the winter, which works out for them, and others, they work at ski areas, and it's a whole large variety of different types of businesses that a lot of camp owners will own in addition to these.
Money obviously is the big issue because, as you point out, if you have a short-term lease, let's say 10, 15, 20 years, and it takes you 30 years to pay off a mortgage, then the banks just aren't going to give you money.
You can't even approach a bank for that, and you won't get an appraisal. And that also, anyone on the leased land that's trying to run a business has that situation. There are campgrounds in Maine that are similar to that in the northern areas, and they have the same problem. They go to the bank and want a loan, and the bank says, well, what kind of lease do you have? And 1-year lease, and the bank says, well, geez, we can't even get an appraisal, we can't give you any loan for that. And so that's a detriment to ever making these properties the quality that they could be.
We'll take a quick break and then talk about how my guest, John Rust, came to start up the Maine Sporting Camp Heritage Foundation. I should mention again that this interview was part of a larger show on sporting camps last year. If you remember that show, maybe you remember John's answer. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. It's Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. I'm Bob Duchesne, and this is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. I've gotten to the age where I no longer study history. I just remember it. And I remember when Maine's historic sporting camps were the jewels of the Maine woods. Once they're gone, that's part of Maine we'll never get back. John Rust heads up the Maine Sporting Camp Heritage Foundation, and he can explain why he started it.
Well, partly I saw that the way the camps were going and the turnover and ownership with the prices being involved, there was no way that they would be able to continue to exist economically. And we didn't want to lose these experiences because as you lose a sporting camp, you lose a place to go hunting or fishing. And so that doesn't help increase or attract new people into those sports either. And the hunters and fishermen, their licenses and taxes pay for a lot of the conservation work we do. But we also found that some of the large conservation landowners were buying these. There were private individuals buying these. It took a lot of capital to buy some of these camps that were being priced at over $1 million. When years ago they would be in the tens of thousands of dollars, and now we're over $1 million, and no camp can operate and generate that kind of revenue.
Yeah, I mean,
so we found conservation buyers. We found people like Roxanne Quimby bought a camp, Linda Bean bought a camp, and the Appalachian Mountain Club bought land and camps, and these are all. On the good side, those camps stay in place. but sometimes we lose our traditions of the hunting and fishing and the other kind of activities that people might enjoy there, and the lifestyle that goes with it, being a family-owned business that's serving people in the public.
Yeah, we're going to have that conflict for a while, too, I think, because that's going to take a while to sort itself out.
Definitely will, and hopefully we can find a way to finance these camps. One of our goals is to help bring some of that conservation funds that the state and federal government is putting into this, plus other individuals putting into broader land conservation. We can apply some of those concepts and monies to buying the land under a sporting camp and be able to turn around and give a longer-term lease so that the business operators can actually get the capital they need to run the business and maintain it, and have these sporting camps be something that Maine really is proud of, and that really do help the tourism in those areas.
Well, as you know, I stuck my nose into one of these little battles. Some of these sporting camps are on Maine land, public reserve land, and I stuck my nose into the Eagle Lake sporting camp situation. The owner was trying to buy a little bit of the land that is on Maine public reserve land, and I went down to testify in Augusta on that bill.
Well, there's several camps that are on land that owns by the state, and in that one case, it's actually surrounded by land the state owns, public land lot. So it's protected as far as encroachment from development, although it is on a lake that is heavily developed at one end. But that camp is on a lot that's leased from the state. And the state is like the other landowners, so they will not give a long enough term lease for any camp owner to really invest in the property. And that one camp, they are trying to develop a very good business with outfitting and so forth, but they are faced with the same situation. They need to make some serious major investments in the quality of their facility, and a short-term lease prevents them from doing that. So their solution is to try to get the state to either give them a long-term lease or sell them the land so it can be operated as a sporting camp and maintained profitably, which means permanently that you'll be able to maintain a good, nice, quality facility for people to visit.
That's a perfect example of the kind of upgrade that some of these camps need. That was built during a period when people were shorter. So if you're walking into any of the cottages at the Eagle Lake sporting camps and you're over 5'6", you bump your head.
Well, I'm not sure how people have grown over the years, but I do know if you go to the remote camps, when these cabins were built, they didn't have a lot of machinery to do it. They didn't have cherry pickers or log loaders and things like that. So sometimes you'll see some of the height is low because it's a lot easier to carry a 7-foot log than a 8-foot log, and that does have an effect. Plus, over the years, those logs have shrunk, and it could have settled, and there could be 3 or 4 inches lower height over those times than from when it was built.
To some extent, what's saving Maine's agricultural industry is new blood, people who are going back to the land, doing organic farming. A lot of our farms are being preserved, and a lot of our traditions being preserved by new blood coming in. But do we have any new blood coming into sporting camps?
Well, there's two main sources that traditionally it becomes the next generation of the family.
Yeah.
The children grow up at the camp that the parents own, and then they start working there and they take it over. And there's a lot of good examples of that in Maine, and that is really part of the heritage that goes with the camps. The other approach is the conservation owners like the Appalachian Mountain Club, who have brought the capital to acquire camps and upgrade the camps and rebuild them and operate them like that. And so the experiences that are at that camp can be maintained, and the site and the setting and the structures and so forth are being well maintained. But the family-oriented nature is not the same. And but at least there are opportunities for other kinds of activities that they promote, and they're good about developing the recreational opportunities in those areas. And the younger people that they typically hire to staff them, because it is a seasonal business and it is a really rugged lifestyle, a lot of work involved and so forth. it does bring younger people in, and some of them, hopefully, maybe they'll get experience at a sporting camp that the MC owns, and they'll become interested in owning a camp of their own someday, and then they'll become more the family-oriented camps that we have as our tradition.
Now, as president of Maine Sporting Camp Heritage Foundation, I assume you're not allowed to have favorites, but do you have one?
Favorite camp?
Yeah.
I've been to quite a few and stayed there and enjoyed them. They're all unique. Each one is unique to its own setting, and so I really don't have favorites. There are some that I go to more often than others for various reasons, not necessarily being favorite, but that's, some generally you go and you share the experience with friends or family, so that becomes your place.
Yeah.
And then you go back year after year. A lot of the clientele are repeat business, and you get together with other people that go at the same time, and it's just like having old friends there with you.
Well,
you get that wherever you are going to go, I think, and so I'm not going to pick.
My guest has been John Rust of the Maine Sporting Camp Heritage Foundation. Do you have a favorite historic sporting camp? This show and my email address are on the web at 929theticket.com. Fill me in. Up next, we'll revisit one more conversation from last year. Something made the front page of the paper last week that reminded me that search and rescue dogs are relatively new and how much we've come to depend on them. Stand by. It's Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. It's Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. And last week, the search for Geraldine Largay began again. She's the Tennessee woman who went missing on the Appalachian Trail a year ago. When I read the story in the Bangor Daily News, there was a photo of Deb Paulman and her search and rescue dog Raven, which brought back to my mind the strong continuing relevance of this interview with Deb last July about the Maine search and rescue dogs. So you retired from the Maine Warden Service.
Yes, I retired in 2008.
Yes, but you were still working very hard on search and rescue. What are you doing?
Well, I've been an active member of the Maine Search and Rescue Dogs since it started. I helped to get it started when I was a warden, and the Maine Warden Service supported the startup of the unit, and we now have, probably close to 20 certified teams. Mm-hmm. That assist the Maine Warden Service and other law enforcement agencies at search and rescue scenes and missing person investigations. I was training director for the longest time. Now I'm president. And I'm also was elected president of the Maine Association for Search and Rescue. I don't know if it's necessarily I'm really good. It's kind of like being selectman in a small town. Nobody else wants to do it.
Exactly. I know that one.
Yeah. But anyway, they've kept me in. I guess I've done an okay job. So that's consuming most of my time. I also run a small consulting business doing dog training, mostly search and rescue and law enforcement training. Mm-hmm. Mostly search and rescue now, and I've also written an online course for working dog handlers and hope to finish one for search and rescue dog handlers.
Is all your training in the state, or this is...
No, actually, most of my training's out of state. I give it away free here to the to the Maine Search and Rescue Dogs. But Maysar now has administrative expenses like insurance. We also do all the dispatching for these units. When the Maine Warden Service wants volunteers, they call the Maysar duty officer. The Maysar duty officer calls all these units, and we have a computer program that does that. That's simply amazing, but it costs $700 a year.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, there's all these little expenses that of things that we really can't live without anymore because that's what makes things run. And there's also some that are very unique. These high-angle rescues that happen back in the woods, there's really only almost just a handful of people in the state that really know how to do that. Mm-hmm. Fire departments work on high-angle work, but it's almost mostly urban or suburban and involves big trucks, heavy equipment, and the ability to get there and get the stuff out and lug it not too far, whereas people like MDI Search and Rescue climb to the top of Cadillac with all their stuff. Well, Cadillac's an exception because you can drive up there, but climb to the top of these mountains, and there's units in Western Maine doing the same thing, and have to lower somebody, off the mountain. Baxter, there's no way to get there except on foot.
Yeah.
And that's, it takes a tremendous amount of manpower and a tremendous amount of skill to pull somebody off a cliff, package them up, and pull them out.
Mm-hmm. Well, where's all this going, and how are we going to pay for it?
I don't know. Maine Warden Service can't pay for, can't get the state to pay effectively for their work they do as wardens in search and rescue.
I have these discussions a lot with a lot of the sporting community about, we keep asking the Warden Service to do more and more, but we never give them any money.
I guess the states that have fixed it, which there aren't a lot,
yeah, right,
have given, their Fish and Wildlife Department a portion of the sales tax, a very small portion, to help do that. In Colorado, anybody who buys a boat ATV registration, snowmobile registration, fishing license, hunting license already contributes to the search and rescue fund. There's like 25 cents a license that goes into that. And then other outlets, sporting outlets, sell a search and rescue card so that people who hike, who don't hunt or fish, don't boat or ATV or whatever, if they want to, they can buy this card. And I think the price is $3. There's a $5 2-for-1 deal, I think. But
oh, well, there.
You can buy the card for the year, and that's your contribution to the search and rescue fund. And it doesn't really get you anything. It doesn't guarantee you'll be rescued. It doesn't guarantee that if you do something really stupid, you won't be charged by the units that are rescuing you. But in general, Colorado does not charge for rescues or searches, and that's one way they've come up to help to support their search and rescue agencies and their volunteer agencies.
Are there states who charge somebody for their rescue?
I don't know.
Yeah, it keeps coming up in state after state, I think, but it's
I don't know. It's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I would think it would be impossible to do.
I mean, politically and financially and...
Yeah. Well, furthermore, people can get in trouble for reasons that are not of their own making. And it could be as simple as dementia.
Yeah, exactly. There's a really good story about that. Years ago, we had a search up in Baxter. And I hate to hear that word search in Baxter. Or even just Baxter, because it's such a horror show to access, to have resources. Yeah. It's not like the real world.
Right.
Everything you want up in Baxter, you have to carry in on your back, basically, once you get off the roads. And there aren't many roads. And we started a massive search for a man from out of state. I can't specifically remember the state, so I'm not going to say. And he had left a commercial campground on the outskirts of the park and didn't tell anybody where he was going, but as near as I could tell, he had gone into the park fishing. And it had been several days, and he hadn't returned. And his tent had fallen flat, and everybody was...
Kind of a bad
people
sign.
Camping around him were like, where'd he go? And so a search started. And then in Baxter, it's like, oh no.
Right.
Because not only is it hard, you can't drive in it, it's really hard to walk through. It's very, very thick.
Well, it hasn't been harvested in a long time.
Well, and there are places of blowdowns where it's basically impenetrable. So we started the search, and there were a number of aircraft involved, and it's like Mission Impossible. It's a huge area. And thank goodness the National Guard showed up, and they spot the guy. And he's like in the middle of nowhere waving his coat. Whatever. And they're able to winch him up. Now, this was back in the days when we had a lot of National Guard help. These days we don't. The funding isn't there, liability issues. We do get National Guard helicopters helping, but it's not as reliable or as prevalent as it was back then. Well, they winched him up. Oh, did I say this guy was a lawyer? They winched him up. I mean, they put corpsman down, who hooked him up, winched him up, and then the corpsman winched up, or they winched up together. And the guy lost he had a pack rod, and the corpsman had taken it from him and put it in his coat. And as he was winching up, he looked over and it fell out. Well, they weren't going back for the fishing rod. Yeah. Well, this lawyer began to complain about how the trails were marked and all this other stuff, and how he got lost and how he suffered all this stuff, and he sent a long letter to the chief warden at the time, who I think was Dan Turlot. And he put at the end of this big long letter, and yes, I lost my fishing rod, which, costs $30 or something. This long letter of complaint, I guess threatening to sue or something or other. So Dan Turlot wrote back a letter, listed all the expenses, which included 2 days of aircraft, and was up like at $45,000 expense to the state and other agencies. And he sent this guy the bill, and he says, "Here, you can take the $30 off the bottom." Never heard back from him.
That's Deb Paulman, retired Maine game warden and president of Maine Search and Rescue Dogs. Just a reminder, this show and all previous shows are on the web at 929theticket.com. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Old Town Trading Post, Dysarts, Hammond Lumber, Napa Auto Parts, Van Raymond Outfitters, O'Neill's Power Equipment, and EBS. Join me next Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on Sports Radio 929 The Ticket.